Alright guys, so for the next part of this project, we need to take our design that you created for your character, and I covered this in our Zoom session last class period, but I've already created my particular design and I've sketched it out on paper. You can of course do this completely digitally, whatever you want, as long as you've got a good head and body design. From here, we need to bring it into our animation and start to build out each of the individual parts. And that's what I want to cover for today's demo. So to get started on this, I'm going to go to my timeline and I'm going to make a new folder. And inside of this folder is where I'm going to put my character. It's just going to make it a little bit easier to keep everything together. From here, I'll make a new layer. I'll click and drag it down underneath and inside of that folder area. And let's call this layer let's call it my outline. We'll use this to place everything else in. Now I don't need to see my rough animation layer, and I certainly don't need my movie at this time. So if you want, you could take your movie and turn it off, but I do suggest at least keeping it on there for now so that when we match up the animation, you can still have it and use it later. So with our outline layer selected, we'll go back up to File, down to Import. Let's import it to the stage. And let's locate and find that picture. Here's my picture here. We'll say Open. You may have to scale and place yours wherever you need to on here. So we'll take that, hold down Shift. And place it onto here. Later on, if necessary, we can always change up the size and placement of it, but for now this actually gives me a pretty good little stance. If necessary, you could turn on your rough animation layer and try to line it up. However, you'll notice that my cartoon is not the same proportion as my actual person. This is because I wanted to cartoonize myself a little bit more. So I'm really going to be using my rough animation as a guideline to how to pose my cartoon animation for my person. But for now, maybe I'll at least scale him up just a bit more and place him roughly where he needs to be. We'll turn that back off. And then finally, since this is going to be my outline layer, I'm going to double click it. Double click on the layer itself to open up the layer properties. I am going to lock it down and I'm going to drop the transparency of it just a bit so I can see it and the things below it. And we'll say OK to that. Now that it's turned on, we should be able to see it and draw on top of it. Now let's take this one part at a time. Keep in mind, everything that you create, especially if it's animated, needs to have its own layer. So I'm going to have my head be within its own layer and actually create a sub layer inside of it so that I can animate it and do what I need to for it. So I'm going to go up to my timeline and let's make a new layer on top of my outline. And we're going to call this the head layer since the head is going to be animated by itself. I'll zoom in on the head, it's there, so I can see it. Now yours is going to be built differently simply because your character may be designed differently. But I kind of want to focus on this the same way we did for the first project where you had the little head you had to draw and move it around. So the head's going to be contained in one thing, and the basic outline shape that I have is kind of a rounded rectangle. So I'm going to choose my rectangle tool. I'll go over to my panel properties and let's round it off a good bit. That looks pretty good for a starting point. And of course I want to change the color of it to whatever skin tone that I can choose. Something that looks pretty good there. By the way, remember when you make different or choose different colors, if you open up your swatches panel, you can add that swatch down to the bottom and makes it much easier to be able to find and come back to it for later reference. With that done, I'm going to click and drag, give myself a good starting point. For me personally, I don't like to draw on top of my design. Rather, I like to just draw off to the side so that I can make little tweaks and adjustments and not have to be constrained to the drawing that I have. But if you prefer to draw on top, totally fine. Go for that, and we can still work with it. Now that I've got just kind of a basic starting point for my head, I'm going to select it. We'll control click or two finger click. Let's turn it into a symbol. Convert to symbol. Remember F8 is the keyboard shortcut. And this is going to be my head symbol. We'll keep it as a graphic, center registration, and place it up right there. Now I can double click on my head symbol and you can see it's its own isolated area. The next thing to think about is how my head is going to move in 3 dimensions. If I'm going to be especially turning my head left to right or looking up and down, some parts need to be morphing their shape, and so I'm going to keep them as shape objects. Other parts can just move up and down or do a regular tween, so I can turn those into symbols. So as I create these, not only do they need to be on their own layer, I need to think about how I want them to be animated and what I can do with them. As far as the back of my head, I'm going to keep this a basic shape, and then I'm going to put all the stuff on top of it. So layer 1, this will be my head shape. Now let's go in and start adding different details. There's no particular order. As long as the stacking order works well, you can do whatever you need. I will lock down what I've got, so I don't actually work on that. I like to work on the nose next. So I'm going to create a new layer. We'll call this the nose, oops, not the note layer, nose layer. I'll zoom into it, and I can draw off to the side and place it off to this area. All right, with this done, I'm going to select my nose, turn that into a symbol as well. We'll call it the nose. That'll be its own individual graphic that can now be moved about as needed. We'll just place them on top of here. Let's do the same thing for, for the eyes. So I'm going to go up to my timeline, make a new layer. This will be my left eye. I'm going to lock down my other layer. Let's draw it. And with that done, we can convert it to a symbol. Now, I don't need to necessarily distinguish between the left and the right eye, since they're essentially going to be the same thing. So I'm just going to make it an eye graphic, and we'll say OK to that. And I've already got my left eye established here, so I'm going to make a new layer. We'll make a copy of this eye, so select it and copy, and let's paste it onto the right eye. That done, Command V, paste it, and we'll place him over here. Now for this particular one, maybe I'll do a transformation where I'll flip it horizontally so it looks a little bit more symmetrical. That looks good for that. With those two done, let's also establish some pupils. Now the pupils don't have to be anything fine or fancy. I'm just going to grab my circle tool, go up to my timeline, and we'll do a left pupil. No, I certainly don't want it to look like that. Let's swap that out. We'll set my stroke color to be none, and my, not none, my fill color to be black. Click and drag through. Let's see, what do I think? Round or, let's go with round. I don't know, I kind of like the openness of that one. We'll do that, but we'll put a little sparkle in his eye. So I'm going to grab my eraser tool. Let's knock out part of that. That looks really, really good. With that pupil established, I can select it, make it into a symbol as well. That's the left pupil. We can copy it, Command C, make a new layer. Command V, and paste one on there. I want it to be the exact same spot, so I'm going to line it up so that it looks good right there. Remember, when you do pupils like this, you don't want to reflect it because that's the little reflection in the eye, and it's always coming from the same direction. So that's why I kept that right there. Now let's knock out those eyebrows. For this one, I could use my brush tool. I've already got black selected. I'm never a fan of just straight eyebrows like that. So maybe I'll give my eyebrows a little bit more personality. Up and round it over. Got that. That looks good. And let's fill it in. Actually, let's select all of these. And now let's fill it in with black. Meh. Not necessarily liking that. So let's redo. Let's regroup and see what we can do. Much better. Now let's fill it in. And I'm going to curve out this particular corner. That looks good. I kind of like that. That's selected. Convert it to a symbol. Now for this one, it just needs to move up and down. So we'll turn it into an eyebrow. This one I didn't put on its own layer, so I need to cut it away. Make sure the eyebrows are on their own layer. Uh-oh. There we go. Eyebrows are on their own layer, not a new folder, a new layer. Eyebrow left. Paste it right into its spot. And let's do a new layer, eyebrow right. Paste that onto there. Line it up good. In this case, we do want to do a transform where we can flip it horizontally. Let's place him over here as well. That's looking good for those. Again, all of our layers are starting to line up here, so make sure you got good layer management. Lock down the layers you're not working on so you don't accidentally place things on there. So far so good. Maybe I'll do a little bit of tweaking for the size of the eyes in just a minute, but now let's tackle some of the other parts. Now for my hair's design, this is going to be kind of a unique little challenge because I want to think of my hair as being an object that moves from side to side in a three-dimensional area. And if I rotated my head from looking straight on, of course if it looks to the left side, I'm going to see more of my hair on the right. And if it looks this way, I would see more of my hair over here. And then the front plane of my head, of course, will be adjusting as well. So for this one, this is a great example of when we need to use a shape tween to create the overall effect. So to do this, I'm going to use my pen tool. We'll select it. Now I've got the advantage of having just straight black hair, so I don't necessarily have to have an outline to it, but I will draw this in outline mode. Whoops. Let's make sure I make a new layer for it as well. We're going to call this the hair layer. That looks good. And with this, we'll draw and trace off everything. Now you remember, the more complex you make it, sometimes the harder those shape tweens can be. But we do have a good opportunity to practice using some of those little suggested shapes. All right, with that done, let's see, I can select it all. Let's fill it in. We'll fill in with black. And finally, I'll get rid of my outer outline. That'll work out for there. From here, let's see if I can tweak this up just a bit. Maybe I don't like that bump off to this side, so I'll scrunch him in and readjust and tweak from there. Now let's see if it actually fits. I'm not going to convert it to a symbol, again, because I want it to look like, I want it to be the kind of thing that can be adjusted as I move it around. Let's do the same thing for the beard as well. So my beard, when I go back and forth, needs to also adjust and be able to swap and get larger or smaller as well. Now my beard does have kind of a goatee area, so I'm going to do my goatee separate from my beard area, and we'll draw that on top. So let's go up here. We'll do the beard. We'll lock that down and draw off kind of the same area for this one. I'm going to grab my pen tool. I like using the pen tool simply because it gives me some nice curves, nice, in my opinion, easier to use, simply because I'm used to using Illustrator. But you can certainly paint this off using a brush tool or whatever you're more comfortable with. There's that. Maybe we'll readjust these lines just a bit. There we go. And let's fill it in. We'll select our object, grab my paint bucket tool, get all those little bits. And finally, let's get rid of the outer outline. From here, I can go in and I can tweak some of these curves, make it look a little bit more like that. All right, with that done, we'll select it, pull it into my design, and make sure everything matches up appropriately. In my case, you can see my hairline doesn't necessarily match up with the bottom of that. That's an easy fix. All we got to do is use our selection tool, click on one area, and I'm going to drag it up until it meets up here. Of course, I will have an ear behind all of this, and a goatee on top of that. We'll lock down both of those layers. Make sure to save up the document you're working on. Let's go to the next part. Go back up to my timeline. Let's tackle the ears. So this will be my left ear. We'll zoom back into him. And just like we did with the other ones, we really only need to make one ear. So I'm going to click and drag through here. Give it a tapered. And of course, just like I did with the nose, if I need to connect it in, we'll just connect those two together. Grab my fill bucket, select my skin color. Let's fill it in with that. Then I can select this and delete it away. With that, we'll select it. We'll convert the ear to a symbol. And with that symbol done, let's place it where it needs to go on one side. And we'll go up. Let's make a right ear. Copy it and paste it onto there. Command C, select a right ear layer, Command V. And go up to transform, flip it horizontal. So we'll place him on that side. Now let's tackle the goatee portion of this. For this one, I need to draw a circle and then an inside portion that shows the mouth. But I'm going to leave the mouth area blank because that's what I want to add later on to do the talking. So for this one, I'm going to start off maybe just with a regular circle. Now let's select it. We will convert this to a symbol. And we'll make that my goatee. I do see I've made a mistake. I've made this in my ear layer. So let's make a new layer. We'll call it my goatee layer. We'll cut this dude away. Select the goatee and paste it. Let's move him into spots. Down with this. Of course, with this, I can make adjustments to fit my overall design. Later on, I'll go through and I'll tweak all of these. It does look a little weird not having his mouth on there, but that will come in a little bit later once it's done. Actually, let's go ahead and make this a little bit larger. Maybe stretch it out. And work with that. Now, the final thing that I need to create are going to be my glasses. When I look at my glasses, again, I want to think about this as a three-dimensional object. I've got my frames that'll always stay roughly where my eyes are going to be. Now keep in mind, my eyes are going to move closer together and farther apart as I move along. And also, as I rotate my head from side to side, you're going to see more or less of the little side parts of my glasses. So if I was to build this out, I'm going to have the frames be on one particular layer, again, a left and a right frame, but I'm going to keep each of the lines on a separate layer. This way, whenever I create these and move them around, I can adjust those frames and adjust those lines to make those look like they're in perspective. So here's how I would build this out. All right, got it placed on here to turn it into a symbol. I did it again. I placed it on the wrong layer. So again, let's lock down these layers. I'm going to cut away my glasses and make a new layer. And let's paste glasses back into that frame. Now they have their own particular layer. With that done, now we can go back and start looking at all the different parts. I can see if I started to draw off my lines. So the lines need to be behind the glasses. So we'll make a new layer, put it below the glasses layer. We'll call it glass line, left. And for this one, we'll draw a line on the left-hand side. I'm just going to use my regular line tool. And these lines, since those are going to change their shape, I'm just going to keep those as being regular, regular shapes. Make it a little bit thicker maybe. And let's round off their edge. And I think those lines actually need to be below my ear. So I'm going to take that one and put it below my ear layer so that my ears place on top of that. That looks good. Let's do the same thing for the left ear, or excuse me, the right ear. We'll go in and tweak this. And let's go up here to make a new layer. This will be my glasses right. Glass line right. And on this layer, draw the same line again. Get my line tool. Drag it off to behind my ear. That looks good. Then if necessary, we'll readjust the starting point for it. I don't want my glasses selected. That'll let it set right there. Now that I've got all of the different major parts of my face done, I can go in and start to tweak this. For instance, I think the head is a little bit too tall and long, so I kind of want to squash everything down. Particularly, I want to squash the hair and the head shape, but I don't necessarily want to adjust other parts. So I'm going to go up to my timeline. I've got everything locked down, so I'm going to unlock my head shape, and let's unlock my hair and my beard. Now I should be able to select all of those layers without affecting the other parts. Grab my transform tool. Let's pull this down just a bit till it looks a little bit more natural. I think I like the look of that much better. Now I can also go in and unlock the other parts. Select those parts. Make sure I've got them unlocked. There we go. and readjust that. So there's my goatee. By the way, my goatee should be underneath my nose. I see my nose is underneath it. So let's go here, place my goatee, and drag it down till it's below the nose layer. Uh-oh, but I don't want it to be below my... There's my nose. And obviously my beard needs to be below my goatee as well. So I'm going to grab my beard, drag that down till it's below my goatee. Now it's looking more correct order for that. Ears are okay. Eyebrows, I think we can move down to a more natural position. And I think the eyes could be a little tad bit smaller. So I'm going to tweak those and bring those down into position. Now with that done, that head I think looks really good. I'm satisfied with it. So we can return to scene 1. And we've got our basic head structure set up and ready to animate. The next thing we can focus on is doing the body portion.